All right, guys, I just wanted to cover a couple more objections with you. We talked about earlier of handling objections before they happen. If you handle it before it happens, it's much easier to handle than trying to deal with the objection afterwards. So the objection I wanted to talk about today was my knives are good enough. I don't know if anybody's ever heard my knives are good enough. Sometimes they say that and you're like, are you kidding me? Are you talking about the same one you're trying to cut the rope with? So my knives are good enough. Here's a question. Has anybody heard of Dr. Albert Moravian before? If you haven't, he's the professor at UCLA that came up with a study that 7% of communication are the words you say. 38% is your tone of voice, and 55% of body is your body language. 55% of communication is the body language. So 93% of what's coming across during your presentation is not the words you say. And you guys, you know how important the manual is. To follow the manual, that just shows you how much more important your tone and your body language is. So my knives are good enough. We handle that objection right here on the junk knives page. So if you say, Mrs. Jones, wood handle knives are unsanitary, you're being about 7% effective. What we want to do is we want to use all our body language, all our communication skills. So even in your manual, it says make that gross face. And you kind of laugh at it when you first see it. But when you go over the section, you say, Mrs. Jones, wood handles are attractive when they're new, but then they crack, break, and splinter, and they absorb germs and bacteria. It's kind of like a sponge. Have you ever wrung out a dirty sponge? That's the kind of stuff that grows in there. And then when you get to plastic handles, with plastic handles, you want to use the tone of voice that nobody in their right mind would ever use a plastic handle knife. But in your training manuals, just go ahead and write, you know. You just want to say, you know, plastic handle knives, Mrs. Jones. Those are the ones they break, they crack, they chip, they fall apart. You know, the plastic handle ones. And they're kind of like, oh, yeah, I know those. And they're kind of like, hide the plastic handle knives because they're embarrassed to bring theirs out again, right? But nobody in their right mind should use a plastic handle knife. And then you get to the construction, you talk about partial tang, and then you talk about the brass rivets, and you're making faces again. You say, Mrs. Jones, the brass rivets, they expand and contract, so you get the stuff around there, and if it's green, it's still growing. That's like, when it's green, it's alive. That's like moldy food and bacteria that's growing on the stuff, and that's what they're using to prepare their food with, right? And then when you get to carbon steel, same thing, right? High carbon steel, it's sharper, but it's rusting, it grows. It's almost like you want to tetanus shot. My manager used to say, Mrs. Jones, using a carbon steel knife would be like, imagine having a nice honey baked ham, and right before you eat it, you went and rubbed it on the tailpipe of a city bus, right? That's kind of what it's like cutting with a carbon steel knife. It's kind of gross. And then stainless steel. Now in your manual, I would underline a word, and the word is soft. That is the key word when you're talking about stainless steel. You say, Mrs. Jones, stainless steel doesn't rust, pit, or corrode, but it's a softer steel, right? So those are the ones. Now, by the way, a quick little investment is if you go to the music store, you can buy like a $4 or $5 music stand that holds your blue book up. I used to drop my blue book all the time. But one of the nice things to have it held up is you can use your hands to talk, right? So when you say, Mrs. Jones, stainless steel, it's a softer steel. So those are the ones you always have to sharpen. And I roll my eyes and I pretend like I'm sharpening. And when you do that, customers usually match you. So when you're like, oh, those are the ones you always have to sharpen, they kind of roll their eyes like, oh, I hate sharpening knives. And then the serrated ones you can't even sharpen. So you just, after they're done, you throw in and replace them. You roll your eyes again. They're like, I hate replacing their knives. Now, this is the key about that, is it doesn't matter if they have cheapo knives or if they have a $2,000 set of Wusthof. They hate sharpening their knives, especially if they have some Wusthof or Shun or something. They're like, I spent $2,000 on this stuff and I still have to sharpen it all the time. And you really kind of tap in to those feelings of, man, I hate sharpening my knives. I hate replacing my stuff. So it doesn't matter what kind of knives they have. You shouldn't hear my knives are good enough. No matter what they have, they should always be like, oh man, my knives are terrible. So imagine how cool it would be if you called somebody on the phone and they said, oh wait, you sell knives? I've been looking to buy knives. I can't wait for you to come see me. How stoked would you be for that appointment? Well, guess what? By doing a good disadvantages of common cutlery section, a good junk knife section, you accomplish that every single time. So if you really use all your body language, the facial expressions, your tone of voice, really dig into that, you're not going to hear my knives are good enough almost ever when you're doing great presentations. Hope that helps. We'll see you next time.